All right. Okay. Well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming today. We're so lucky to have Dr. Suhas Kashir Sagar here, who's a BAMS MD in Ayurveda and is a world-renowned Ayurvedic physician and author. He is a director of an Ayurvedic healing and integrative wellness clinic in California, and we're just so blessed to have you here today. We're going to launch right in, Dr. Suhas, if you don't mind, just because we want to hear all the pearls of clinical wisdom that you bring to the table. And we're just really excited to have you and really launch from where we kind of ended at our conference. Not everybody was able to probably join the panel discussion, but really trying to have a conversation about the Ayurvedic professional role here during COVID-19. So I'm going to pass this off to you.
Well, thank you, and happy to be here with our own community. And I think this situation with the pandemic, I feel is a great opportunity for all the Ayurvedic practitioners, because this is exposing the very need what we can fill in. And the need is that we need hundreds and thousands of barefoot doctors that can go out and do wellness education to people. Because what we are painfully realizing that no country, how rich it is, can handle this kind of a crisis. And it will boil down to individual health and well-being. What can you do in terms of wellness education, food, diet, sleep, exercise, lifestyle modification? And Ayurveda is the original lifestyle medicine. And what we are realizing with all the scientists that are converging on this point and are kind of stumped because of finding a cure or vaccine for this, is the response to this outside attack of the virus. So what the body is reacting and how different body types are reacting it differently. So I think if you go back and look at our own body of knowledge, we are going to find tremendous help and understanding that the sages were really, really wise to really decode this information in such a beautiful way that can be so applicable. Because something can come from outside, but how your body reacts to that will decide how you're going to get a disease and whether you're able to maintain a state of health. And even when we go back to our textbook now, to go back to the doshas and the dhatus and the malas, and why this language is not confined to the structure, but the functional aspect of the physiology. And I think that is what we are realizing now. The silos that were created, that this is this system, that is that system, are no more there. Even the latest scientists would tell you that they can't tell a difference between an immune system and a nervous system anymore, because they're converging, they're talking, and there are areas where they converge that we would not have imagined before, whether it is in the gut, whether it is in the lymphatics. And I think there's nothing better than Ayurveda to really understand that. So every time I read a research paper, it's literally music to my ears, because we have been talking about the concept of srotas, the concept of Agni, the concept of Ama, the concept of Ojas and the vitality, and how it syncs to the cellular nutrition, and how we should boost the innate strength in the physiology and the connection of the mind. I think who better than us to talk about this? Because when I look at all the concurrent bodies of research that are out there, there's hardly any real mention of what mind is doing. And I think this is what I'm really worried about with the current pandemic, that we are missing the boat, where people are getting so stressed out, unhappy, stuck, static, stagnant, and leading to even more unhealthier lifestyle than before. And that's the latest research that came out, where people in quarantine are developing even more unhealthy habits. They're smoking more, they're drinking more, they're eating junk food, they're sitting and watching unwanted, cluttered news networks, getting more fearful, binge watching Netflix. The alcohol sales went up by 243%. And this is not a great picture, because these are all immunosuppressants. They are going to suppress the whole thing. And more importantly, the fear that this is generating is what is creating a bigger problem. And the whole aspect of neuroimmunomodulation, as we talk about, okay? So the nervous system, which modulates your immune responses, that needs to be boosted right now. And I think we need to be focusing on creating a herd immunity, creating a collective consciousness where we are helping each other and creating and boosting each other's nervous system, not in confinement, not in isolation. And I'm not saying that everybody should go out and start doing things, but it's as safely as sooner as we can do that. This is going to probably relieve a lot of stress, which is pent up in the nervous system of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everything that we talk from an Ayurvedic perspective is exactly that way. And this is even a more important time to go out and talk to your own patients, clients, practitioners, the importance of foods, vibrant, rainbow colored fruits and vegetables. They're loaded with a variety of different things, even anti-inflammatory properties. You talk about bitter taste, you talk about six taste, you talk about antioxidants, bioflavonoids. They are loaded with these things. So paying attention to food, paying attention to diet, paying attention to exercise, and more importantly, going back to this understanding that what are the clinical protocols to treat this? And I'm aware that you and me are not able to really treat an acute condition of a COVID infection anytime. But there'll be so many people who will ask questions that what can I do to prevent this infection? What can I do to even boost my immunity? What can I do to reduce my inflammatory response to if something happens that way? And
Yeah,
I think,
oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I was going to say, I think that's a really important thing to focus on, because one thing that many people have been hearing is that this COVID issue, we're not really sure when there is going to be a resolution. And as you know, I'm very much involved with treating infectious disease in my own clinical practice. And so we know that these microbes, they're not necessarily new. And so our prevention model from an Ayurvedic perspective is a model it's for yesterday, it's for today, and it's for tomorrow, really.
it is time tested. And even the description that you see about this kind of pandemic in Ayurvedic literature is so phenomenal. It's so phenomenal. So we need to go back and look at those things one more time. They have talked about social distancing. They have talked about quarantine. They have talked about isolating people and places in houses and coloring them differently, marking them differently, creating structures that people understand, still creating ways to diffuse and purify the air, purify the water, change the elemental nature by purifying activities of mind and consciousness building, group activities of collective meditations, group activities, satsangs, rituals, all of those things, which are very powerful. And the important point here is that what we are suddenly realizing is that everybody is talking about finding a vaccine or a miraculous cure. And I think the discussion should be that why, as a country, us have the highest mortality rate than any other country in the globe. Okay. And that is the million-dollar question. And the question is, there's something unhealthy in our diet and lifestyle that is going around that is making us more prone, more vulnerable, and more susceptible for these kind of attacks, I would say. So improving general health and well-being should be the focus. That's number one. And secondly, going back to the clinical understanding, what were the herbs that were used? What were the spices that were used? And we are using these different models that are targeting things differently. But when you look at the description from an Ayurvedic perspective, they're all bitter energetics. They're all pungent to declog the ama, to open the srotas, to improve circulation, because fever is number one symptom. And that fever is the response. Instead of thinking of this as something really bad or terrible, I think Hippocrates once said that give me the strength to create fever and I can cure anything. So it's a response for the body to get rid of the clutter that is being created. So the therapeutic treatments for rasavasrotas from an Ayurvedic perspective, okay, jvara, and the bitter energetic treatment that is mentioned for all jvara should be ideally really good for the treatment in these conditions as a first line of defense or prevention, I would say. And Government of India and Ayush Ministry had actually described or created a blend that was called as Ayush 64. Ayush 64, which contain various Ayurvedic herbs like Saptaparani and Rasna and Kutki and Chirayata, which is quinine. And they were very effective. And what they have seen as the treatment for malaria, what they have created, the same blend is actually effective in helping people to get better with the COVID infection also.
Yeah.
So the research that you and me were talking about earlier with artemisinin,
Mhm.
and artemisinin is sweet wormwood, and there's an Ayurvedic correlate that has been described in classical Ayurvedic literature called as Indhana.
Mm.
Indhana is the Ayurvedic name for sweet wormwood or artemisinin. And about a year ago, a Chinese researcher got a Nobel Prize in medicine for isolating the compound and treating malaria. So she received a Nobel Prize, and now they're using this as actually a cure or a remedy for COVID-19. And
Mhm.
I think the response is more or less the same, exactly that we are looking at what are the inflammasome pathways that we are trying to address and how the body is generating an inflammatory response. And the things are working in vitro. In the Petri dish, things work.
Mhm.
But in vivo, when it happens, it's a different ball game sometimes.
That's right.
And that's where the challenge is. So
Yeah.
the body's response to something is going to be different based upon your balam, your
Mhm.
strength. And Ayurveda has described various ways of boosting your trivid balam, as they call it. So sahaj, kalaj, and yuktikrut. Sahaj means a natural strength or immunity that you develop from your parents and things like that. Kalaj is seasonal. So this is exactly as the change of season. And I think Ayurveda has been talking about seasonal transition, Ritu Sandhi, Ritu Kala, related with purification during the seasonal transition, especially in the spring and the fall time for ages together. This is the highest proportions of the allergic response and things happen during this time. And doing an effective cleanse actually would help you boost your ability to defend yourself.
Mhm.
So there are tools that are described in classical Ayurvedic literature that can be so powerful. And many times when we are thirsty, we start digging a well. And
Mhm.
that's what we see right now. But I think it is important that we suddenly create a template. And my request to my Ayurvedic friends and colleagues is really go back and look at your own textbook, look at your own studies, and try to find out something which creates a blend of East and West, gives you the understanding why this has been described this way. And the
Mhm.
pathways of this disease, moving from rasavasrotas to rakhtavasrotas, is the junction point here. So rasa and rakta. So
Mhm.
when we say that this is a vascular impact on clotting of the blood or creating blood impurities, it is moving from rasa to rakta. It is creating endothelial inflammation. It is creating vascular inflammation. And the herbs that are reducing VEGF, as they call it,
Mhm.
okay, it
Yeah.
is exactly what is going to prevent the rasavasrotas getting impure and getting into raktavasrotas.
Mhm.
And what can you do to decongest the vascular inflammation? What can you do to improve the flow of rasa and purify the flow of rasa? And going back from rasa all the way to mamsa, meda, asti, majja, because when it comes to majja and shukra and ojas, you're talking about stem cell, you're talking about immunity, which actually comes from the source itself.
Mhm.
So when you talk about purifying your majja and shukra and ojas to a certain degree, when we talk about immunity, it is actually following this very basic pathways of immunity is related with nervous system. And I think Ayurveda is the first science that has actually talked about this concept of the junction point of the immunity and the nervous system at the level of majja dhatu.
Can I ask a quick question right now? Because you touched on something before that I thought was really important to pause on, which is fever. And I wonder if we could talk about that a little bit more, because if we were to even look at, okay, why, and this comes back to my own clinical practice, and it's always a curious question that I have with my clients, and I've been asking this question for years, like, do you actually mount fever? And one of the things that I've noticed, and I do believe this is part of the Western cultural influence, that many people do not mount fever. Even if they think they mount a fever, it's a very low grade fever. There's no robust. And when I was in naturopathic medical school, we really spoke about how to have a really efficient fever, you need to get a little bit higher. I mean, I've heard 103.1.3 in order to really be able to affect the microbe that's, you know, caused an insult. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Well, it's a high degree fever. It's impossible to create that high degree of fever with anything. I've only seen some people receiving interferon injections and stuff that they get that kind of high degree of fever, but it's impossible to create that kind of fever. And it is about 102 degree or 103 degree of fever that we talk about. You cannot get into a sauna and create that kind of a fever.
Mm-hmm.
But the treatment that you do for fever is exactly the treatment that we are doing here in order to boost this our fight against the virus itself.
Mm-hmm.
They have talked about langanam, which is fasting. Okay,
Yep.
langanam, svedanam, kalo, yavago, stiktako rasaha. So bitter taste, that's number one. Then fasting. It's one of the most underutilized healing medical modality, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Svedan, which is a gentle sweating, wrapping and allowing them to sweat. And this protocol, which is good for cardiometabolic rehab also to a certain extent. So when we look at the situation of how the body creates fever, and in response to fever, how the body responds to the infection and the inflammation, which might sound opposite to a certain degree, but that increased heat is able to cool you down to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the trick here, where we are realizing that inflammation is the silent epidemic. And we used to think from an Ayurvedic perspective that the correlate in classical Ayurvedic literature that they talk about Shotha. Shotha is the disease that they talk about related with swelling or inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a specific type of Shotha which is called as Nija Shotha. Nija means endogenous swelling or inflammation. So this is something that happens within the body in response to food, bugs, viruses, or various situations. And treatment of Nija Shotha, if you look closely, is exactly what we need to try to create here. Because it is going to be multimodality option anyway. And if we try to really follow many of these protocols that have been effectively addressed, whether it's about sweating, about decongesting, about fasting, about the right kind of foods, even giving gentle gruels with some simple spices, in how it boosts your immunity and how it allows your body's mechanism to deal with any outside infection during this situation. Because this virus that we're talking about is just one little continuum on the various different things that we're talking about for a long time, whether we talk about SARS or MERS or COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're all respiratory, they're all airborne, you are inhaling them. So you are ingesting them. And this whole Ayurvedic beauty of keeping your nasal passages warm and lubricated, that is the physiological mask that we're talking about. It's the mask. When you keep your nasal passages moist, it doesn't trap. The spike of the virus actually latches that protein onto the mucous membrane, and that's when you start creating a response toward that. So when you keep these things moist, and as a part of Ayurvedic daily routine, to lubricate your ears, to lubricate your nasal passages, even your mouth, and keeping it well oiled and lubricated will help you for prevention. So there are nuggets and nuggets of things that are described in Ayurvedic literature, which could be so effective. I think what is needed is our practitioners, our students, our teachers need to go out and confidently talk about this and help as many as people as we can. And I think now people are going to have their ears to us. They want to learn more. They want to find out more. What can they do to prevent the next wave that might come in this coming fall or next spring or anything like that? And I think the sooner we get back to work, the better it's going to be.
So you've touched on a few of the clinical recommendations you've made, and we know that the Ministry of Ayush has given some recommendations as well. Could we touch on some of that and like what you think some of the top, 5 to 10 that you really want to emphasize for our professionals?
I think hot water or herbal infusions, hot infusions, which are infused with some simple spices. It could be cumin, coriander, ginger, lemon. They have given a simple concoction in Ayush, and I fully agree. Hot water is something which is the best remedy to break the fever, is the best remedy to get rid of stickiness and ama and open the circulation. So hot water, herbal, hot infusion is one of the best things. Eating less, eating light, eating right. okay? Having a gentle amount of fasting, eating the right foods. That is so important because you can't burden your system with another truckload of armor during this situation. You want to keep it light. And I think we have enough research that talks about um, the upregulation of so many genes that happen during gentle fasting. Okay, enough research that is documented. Because at the end of the day, whether you talk about inflammasomes or cytokine storms or whatever it is about certain genes that they get turned on, they don't know how to shut off.
That's right.
That's the reason why it is happening. Is that right? So your ability to go to the core where you can address those with such simple mechanism. It could be fasting, it could be hot water, it could be even an effective bowel movement once or twice a day can do wonders for you, because there are so many organs and systems that get benefit with the situation. Simple tongue scraping is important. Putting drops in the nose is important. Gargling with salt, hot water, and turmeric is important. Doing a simple steam inhalation to lubricate and create drainage through your sinuses is important. Oil pulling is important. Abhyanga is important. Doing an oil massage to the skin, because this when you do the oil massage on the skin, it releases neurotransmitters and neurohormones, and that's the language that the immune cells connect and speak to each other. And I think that is when we should be confidently talking about these simple things that are so scientifically effective, I would say. And I think Abhyanga is good, dry brushing is good, tongue scraping is a good idea, eating warm meals, staying away from too much cold food, salad, packaged, processed, anything which takes toll on your agni. Cooked food releases 15 times more energy than something which you take a toll on your digestion itself. So during this time especially, cooking them so that there's less and less chances of any kind of exposure is a better idea. Keeping the body physically active during this time of quarantine. There's a term that they have come up with, it's called as quarantine 15, because by the time everybody comes out of it, they would have put 15 pounds.
That's right. Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Like freshman 15, but
I'm not making it up. This is out there, and that's what people are talking about. And so making sure that you're staying physically active. Could be simple cardio or lifting weights or doing something to boost the circulation. Doing purposeful activity means you have no excuse now that I don't have time to do this or that. Right. You always have time to sit down to meditate, close your eyes, or do something that is something different that you haven't done. More importantly, going back to your kitchen cabinet and using spices and learning how to blend it and create something. And I think sleep is one of the most potent anti-inflammatory activity that you would ever do. So making sure that your sleep hygiene, your sleep routine is important. And they all link each other. It means your diet depends upon exercise, exercise depends upon sleep, sleep will decide what kind of food you will eat. So this tripod is feeding each other. And I think what we do during this time is cultivating some very positive, healthy habits. That will really guide us and inspire us for a long time. And more importantly, you're together, stuck with the family as a unit. So how you learn and teach each other certain things, that is even better. And another important thing is about emotions. Okay, because at the end of the day, paying attention to what your mind is telling you, what you're listening to your own radio station, probably first time, because the things have slowed down now. And trying to find out and ask yourself the $1 billion question, that who you are and what do you want to do and how you look at things. Can you create a little detached, dispassionate way of looking at anything and everything? And I think that that spiritual outlook is absolutely needed. And I think any adversity that humanity has ever faced has always made them spiritual. And that's the silver lining in this.
That's great. Well, you haven't mentioned one thing, which I know this is just such a short period of time, but the recommendations from the Ministry of Ayush, one of the top things, and I hesitate saying this because I don't want this to turn into like what happened with the toilet paper, but the Chyawanprash is like everybody's going to go out and buy it maybe. Do you have a comment on that? Are you recommending that to everyone, or it's What's
I'm
your
not recommending that to everyone because it's an excellent remedy. It's a rasayana that is described for a tonic for lungs.
yeah.
The reason why I didn't mention is about the availability and the purity and the quality that you are able to have access to that. And again, it needs agni. It needs your ability to even digest a rasayana also. Okay, so if you have access to it, Chyawanprash is an excellent remedy. Amla is a unique herb, I would say. It reduces pitta, it reduces inflammation. It has a lot of documented proofs about reducing cellular and vascular inflammation in various pathways of the body itself. So it is important, but you need to have agni. You need to have the strength of digestion to digest that. So Chyawanprash, no doubt, yes, you should have that.
And it's also high in vitamin C, which I know you've probably read some of the research that's slowly coming out about maybe the impact of vitamin C and how important it is.
It is high in vitamin C, and not only vitamin C, there are so many things out there. Okay, so that is enough documentation why vitamin A is important, why
Yes.
vitamin C or D or even B3 niacin, which is going to create this warm fever-like flush that is so important in this condition. Creating a blend of high doses of vitamin C, citrus fruits are important. Even exposure to warm weather now, when you're exposed to vitamin D even more, is better for you. Okay,
Yes.
so I think there is enough documentation about vitamins that we should encourage people where to get it naturally, how to source it, and maybe cleaner supplements, even minerals.
Mm-hmm.
Enough research has been talked about zinc and selenium
Absolutely.
and chromium and how you can get that from the foods. And if you're eating good, green, organic, natural fruits and vegetables, you will get abundant of this. And if you can have some clean supplementation, absolutely, this is important. And I think from an Ayurvedic perspective, um, we want to get things which contain prana, which contains the force of life, and it should support and feed the force of life in our body. So in this situation, we are talking about things, what we can do that is going to feed the vital self of our body. So vitamin supplementation, no doubt, a gentle cleanse, even a castor oil purgation, things to help you to create more urination, which happens because of drinking hot water and herbal infusion, creating a diuresis, creating a gentle sweating. Even opening pathways, a gentle purification is a good act to do during this time.
So, we're in speaking about, this fact that we're going to be dealing with this and other microbial infections that, potentially could be is problematic down the road. Like, what would you say? Like, what's your thought about this? I mean, do you think, we're really just getting started here with, having a pandemic at this time? And I guess I'm sort of knocking on your door about this in relationship to Jyotish in some ways. I don't know if you want to comment on that. We're only in a few more minutes left, but do you think as a whole, like when we think of like the universal impulse and what's happening right now with this pandemic and what are the bigger ramifications going down the road, I don't know what comes up for you when I ask
I
this
think
question.
as a medical astrologer, I've seen certain very unique, weird planetary combinations that are happening right now, which is kind of Kal Sarpa Yoga, when most of the planets are kind of sandwiched between Rahu and Ketu. The combination that was going on with the Saturn placement, and that is freeing itself now, and it's going to get better from 13th of May also. So there are chances that the things are going to get better and improve, and probably by September we would have come a long way, and this nightmare has in some way ended. But this is a lesson to the humanity that we are suddenly realize that collectively, without one person doing something wrong or good or bad, it is the impact on the overall humanity.
If
And
it,
we need to,
mm,
and we need to create a global immunity to defend this. And I think this will come from righteousness,
mm,
thinking dharma rasa, the rasa where degradation of dharma is one of the main reasons why there are natural calamities that happen of this scale. Okay, and there's no reason to hide this fact that the collective greed and anger and separatism and things like that is at the main reason why Mother Nature sometimes gets a little bit more affected with that. It creates changes and shift in the weather pattern. And this is something classically explained in Ayurvedic literature, how this happens. The changes in air, water, land, and season in the time, this is classically described. And the remedies for that is coming together, understanding the world is my family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Doing something for your individual health is going to affect the collective health and the society also. Making sure there's a purity of thought, speech, action. All of these things may sound very esoteric and out there, but this is a fact that the global warming is giving rise to this internal inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to cool ourselves down. We need to relax. We need to unwind. We need to create some degree of friendliness and brotherhood for everybody. And as it starts happening, as each country is trying to help each other and learn from each other, it has created these bridges because of this adversity. And I simply hope that the world is going to be very different hereafter.
Well, I'm so grateful that you came. I can't believe we're already, time is up. I want to automatically just say thank you to you and for coming and giving us your wisdom, and invite you back in the future to share more of your knowledge with our professionals. And I'm so grateful that you were able to just make the time to come out for everybody. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dr. Suhas.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Have a great day. Blessed
You too.
all.
Everyone. Thank you. Bye.